Please follow Moonlit Romance Library before the sacred spring decides who is worthy. Chapter 1 At noon, when every bell in Crownwell should have rung with silver joy, the sacred spring died like a candle pinched between two wet fingers. The new queen, Maribel of Rosemere, stood on the marble lip of the holy basin with a golden cup raised over her dark red curls. Her sleeves were stitched with pearls, her smile was sharp enough to slice apple skin, and the crown of Crownwell sat on her head as if it had been placed there by someone too nervous to check whether it fit. Viola stood 4 steps below her in a plain blue gown that had once been court silk and was now work silk, mended at the cuff and hemmed twice. Her hair, bright gold and too long for sensible court grief, fell in a thick braid past her hips. The braid had been Maribel's suggestion. "It will make you look humble," the new queen had said that morning. "It will keep me from strangling anyone," Viola had answered in her mind, because she had been raised to be useful before she was ever allowed to be honest. The whole city watched from the terraces. Wolf lords in fur-lined mantles, bakers with flour on their sleeves, soldiers with polished spears, children perched on window ledges, old women who had seen 3 kings and trusted none of them. Every face had turned toward the spring, because the spring was older than the throne, older than the wolf crown, older than the cathedral built around it. The sacred water fed the city, blessed the fields, cooled fevered babies, and made Crownwell rich enough for kings to mistake themselves for gods. Maribel lowered the cup. The old chant rose. "Water under stone, water under crown, rise for the queen who wears us now." The spring should have answered with a bright surge. It should have filled the golden cup, leapt through the carved wolf mouths, and washed the marble steps in blue light. Instead, the basin gave a rude little gulp. The last ribbon of water vanished into a crack. Somewhere beneath the cathedral floor, something snorted. For 3 seconds the city made no sound at all. Then the new queen whispered much too loudly, "Did I do it wrong?" Viola closed her eyes. Her heart hurt, which was inconvenient. She had expected to feel shame today, perhaps anger, perhaps the steady ache that came when her former husband King Rowan looked past her as if 12 years of service had turned her into furniture. She had not expected the ancient spring to collapse in front of every witness from the fishmonger to the archbishop. She smelled wet clay. Not dry stone. Not divine judgment. Clay. That was wrong. The sacred spring did not fail upward or downward. If it withdrew, it left mineral salt on the marble. If it flooded, it smelled like iron. Wet clay meant riverbed mud. It meant a channel had been disturbed. Viola took 1 step toward the basin. King Rowan caught her movement from the royal dais. He was broad-shouldered, handsome in the way a wolf banner was handsome, all gold hair and clean teeth, and the sort of confident posture that made men follow him even when they should first ask where he was going. Once, when he had been a prince, he had loved that Viola noticed cracked wells and hungry children before she noticed jewels. Once he had kissed her muddy hand and called her the steady heart of his future reign. After the crown settled on him, he had grown tired of steady hearts. "Stay where you are," Rowan said. His voice was not cruel enough to be useful, not kind enough to be forgiven. Maribel turned. Relief flashed across her pretty face when she found someone else to blame. "Perhaps the old queen has offended the spring by touching the preparations." Viola almost laughed. It came up bitter and bright. "If offended water could speak, Your Majesty, most palace plumbing would be screaming." Several old women in the lower gallery made the dangerous, choking sound of people trying not to laugh. Rowan's eyes narrowed. "Viola." The floor shook. The marble basin cracked from rim to base. A second snort came from below, followed by a splash so powerful that the golden cup flew from Maribel's hands and struck the archbishop on the knee. The holy man folded down with a noise not found in scripture. The crowd screamed as the center of the basin split open. A long blue horn rose from the darkness. Then another. A vast, narrow head pushed through broken marble, lacquered in scales the color of storm water over jade. Silver whiskers unfurled on either side of its snout. Its eyes were round, green, and furious. Water streamed from a mane of soft fins along its neck. It was no pet dragon, no tiny court novelty trained to curl on a pillow and sneeze sparks for guests. It was an old river guardian, the kind grandmothers mentioned when children wasted drinking water. It was also apparently in a terrible mood. The dragon shook itself, drenching the new queen, the king, 6 bishops, and 1 visiting duke who had deserved it since breakfast. Maribel shrieked. "My gown!" The dragon blinked at her, reached out 1 claw, lifted the crown off her head as delicately as a lady choosing a biscuit, and flung it down the steps. The crown clanged once. Twice. It rolled to Viola's feet, and stopped against the toe of her sensible shoe. The whole city turned to look at her. Viola looked down at the crown. Then she looked at the ancient blue dragon dripping cathedral water onto the sacred floor. "That," she said carefully, "is not mine." The dragon opened its mouth. Instead of flame, it breathed a cloud of warm mist that smelled of rain, mint, and old pipes. The mist formed one word against the marble wall. "Keeper." Rowan rose so fast his chair fell backward. "Seize that creature." The dragon sneezed. A jet of water shot across the dais and filled the king's left boot. The crowd gasped. Then, because Crownwell was a city and not a monastery, someone in the back laughed so hard she dropped her onion basket. That was when the cathedral doors swung open. The man who entered was taller than any man Viola had ever seen. Not merely tall, but built like a black tower that had learned to move. He wore dark armor worked with dragon scale patterns, a long cloak pinned at one shoulder, and no crown at all. His hair was black as winter ink, his face clean-cut and unsmiling, his eyes a startling gray that made the bright cathedral seem suddenly dim around him. Every woman in the south gallery inhaled at once. Viola did not blame them. She was practical, not blind. Lord Silas of Blackmere, called the Dragon King because his house guarded the old wells and the dragon roads, stopped at the broken basin. His gaze moved from the extinguished spring, to the crown at Viola's shoe, to the dragon. He did not look surprised. He looked as if a legal problem had grown fins. "Majesty," Silas said to Rowan, "I arrived to renew the water covenant." The blue dragon hissed, lunged with embarrassing speed, and snatched the black iron gauntlet from Silas's left hand. It bounded down the steps, much too nimble for something longer than a wagon, and shoved its stolen prize under Viola's skirt. Viola froze. The cathedral froze with her. Silas looked at the dragon. The dragon looked deeply pleased with itself. Silas descended the marble steps. Each pace was measured, calm, and fatal to several unmarried hopes in the audience. He stopped before Viola, then lowered to one knee. Heat rushed up her throat. The stolen gauntlet lay somewhere against the inside hem of her skirt. The ancient dragon had curled behind her ankles like a guilty blue rope. Silas lifted his eyes to hers. "Lady Viola," he said, his voice low enough to belong to midnight, "I promise this is not my usual way of courtship." The old woman with the onion basket laughed again. Viola ought to have been humiliated. She ought to have stepped back. She ought to have remembered that her former husband was staring, her city was thirsty, and an ancient water guardian had just announced something dangerous in front of every noble in Crownwell. Instead, she heard herself say, "Then I hope your usual way involves fewer witnesses." Silas's mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Something rarer. He reached beneath the edge of her skirt with absolute care, his fingers never touching more than the fabric around the gauntlet. Even so, the nearness of his hand to her ankle made the air lose its manners. He drew the gauntlet free, stood, and put it back on. Then he turned toward the king, the queen, the bishops, the nobles, and the city. "The spring has not rejected a queen," Silas said. "It has identified its keeper." Rowan's face darkened. "You have no right to speak over my throne." Silas did not raise his voice. That made the words worse. "I am not speaking over your throne. I am speaking under it. That is where the water runs." The dragon gave an approving rumble, then set its wet chin on Viola's foot. Viola looked down at it. "You are heavy," she whispered. The dragon closed its eyes and pretended not to understand. Chapter 2. The guards did not seize the dragon. This had less to do with obedience and more to do with the fact that the first guard who tried had his helmet filled with water. The second found his spear bent into a shepherd's crook, and the third remembered an urgent appointment with his aunt. Silas stayed beside Viola as the cathedral dissolved into panic. He did not stand in front of her as if she were a parcel to be hidden. He stood half a pace to her right, leaving her visible, leaving her room, yet making it clear that anyone who reached for her would need to explain himself to 210 centimeters of armored displeasure. Rowan came down the steps with the wet boots squelching. The sound made his dignity suffer with every stride. "This ceremony is suspended," he said. "The former queen will be questioned." "I would be delighted to answer questions," Viola said, "if any are chosen by someone familiar with water." Rowan stared at her as if she had slapped him. Once she would have softened. Once she would have wrapped truth in cloth so he could hold it without being cut. Today, with the crown at her feet and the city thirsty, She found no cloth nearby. Maribel gripped the broken basin. Her pearl sleeves hung soaked to the elbow. Without the crown, she looked younger. Not innocent, exactly. A fox could look young after stealing poultry. She ruined my ceremony, Maribel said. She has always hated me. Your ceremony ruined itself, Viola replied. I merely dressed for the funeral. Someone coughed behind a fan. Rowan's jaw tightened. Take her to the east chamber. 2 palace bailiffs pushed through the bishops. They were heavy men, hired for hands rather than minds. The first reached for Viola's arm. The blue dragon opened one eye. Silas spoke first. Do not. One word. No shout. No flourish. The bailiff stopped as if his boot soles had grown roots. Rowan turned on Silas. Are you threatening my men inside my own cathedral? No, Silas said. I am advising them before the water guardian becomes creative. The dragon licked its teeth. The bailiff reconsidered his career. The archbishop, still rubbing his knee, limped forward. Lord Silas, if the spring identifies a keeper, the old covenant requires public verification. Until then, Lady Viola cannot be imprisoned. Rowan looked at the old man with open betrayal. Viola almost pitied him. Rowan preferred rules when they crowned him. He disliked them when they stood up straight. Silas bent and picked up the crown. He did not hand it to Viola. He did not hand it to Maribel either. He carried it to the altar and set it on a dry stone ledge. The crown may wait, he said. The city cannot. The words struck harder than any insult. Viola felt them in her bones because they were the words she had lived by and been punished for living by. The city cannot wait. The well cannot wait. The baby with fever cannot wait. The lower mills cannot wait. The kitchen girls cannot wait until kings finish feeling adored. Rowan's eyes moved from Silas to Viola, and something old and ugly flickered there. Jealousy, yes, but also confusion, as if he could not understand why another powerful man had looked at Viola and seen not an inconvenient wife, but a necessary person. You knew this creature, Rowan said. Viola looked at the dragon. Its whiskers curled around her ankle. It was trying to look innocent, which on a creature with horns and cathedral debris in its mane was ambitious. I knew of it, she said. The dragon snorted. Fine, Viola amended. We have met. Gasps spread through the crowd. Maribel pointed at her. She confesses. To plumbing, Viola said. The onion woman was now wiping her eyes. Silas's gaze rested on Viola. Where? She hesitated. The answer belonged to a place before court, before marriage, before the wolf crown, before she learned that patience could become a cage if praised often enough. The convent aqueduct, she said. I was 9. The dragon's tail thumped once, sending a wave across the marble. Silas nodded as if that explained more than it should. Then the guardian owes you a hearing. It owes me 3 ribbons and an apology, Viola said. The dragon huffed warm mist at her knee. The crowd was no longer only frightened. They were listening. That mattered. Viola could feel the shape of the morning changing. A public humiliation had become a public question. Questions, if fed properly, could grow teeth. From the lower stair, a girl's voice called, Lady Viola. A small figure shoved between 2 guards. Cora, the palace water carrier, came running with one shoe tied and the other flapping loose. She was 15 or perhaps 17, depending on whether she wanted pity or wages, with brown curls stuffed under a cap and a face made for trouble. She carried a yoke with 2 empty buckets. The west cistern is dry, Cora panted. The baker quarter is shouting. The laundry women are saying words I cannot repeat near bishops, though one bishop taught me to. The archbishop looked away. Viola's stomach dropped. Dry how fast? Like someone pulled a plug under the whole hill. Silas turned toward the broken basin. Not a sacred failure. A diverted source. Viola had known it, but hearing him say it aloud steadied her. The spring did not choose this moment by miracle. Someone timed the damage for the ceremony. Maribel's face changed. Only for a breath. Fear slipping under anger. Rowan did not see it. He was still staring at Silas. Convenient that the Dragon King arrives at the moment of crisis. Covenant noon is fixed by law, Silas said. Your grandfather set the hour. And the dragon throwing the crown? Silas glanced at the creature. I rarely schedule dragons. They object to ink. The dragon sneezed at Rowan's wet boot again. Viola covered her mouth too late. Rowan heard the laugh she failed to kill. His face hardened into something that reminded her why grief sometimes ended before marriage did. Lady Viola will remain under watch, he said. Lord Silas may inspect the spring with my officers. No, Viola said. The word came out small, but it rang. Everyone looked at her. She lifted her chin. If I am under watch, the person who damaged the river gains time. I know the lower channels. Cora knows the service ways. The dragon knows whatever it knows when it is not stealing formal armor. Lord Silas knows the old wells. We inspect together. Rowan stepped close enough that the wet leather of his boot creaked. You forget your place. There it was. The sentence he had once been too tender to say, and later too comfortable to avoid. Viola's fingers curled around the empty handle of Cora's bucket. The old habit rose. Be calm. Be useful. Do not give them the pleasure of seeing pain. Then she saw Cora watching her, wide-eyed. She saw the baker's boy in the crowd licking dry lips. She saw Maribel clutching the cracked basin, as if the whole city had become a stage trap beneath her slippers. Viola stepped backward, not in fear, but to stand beside the crown on the altar ledge. My place, she said, appears to be wherever the water goes. The blue dragon lifted its head and gave a sound very like applause. Chapter 3 Getting to St. Brigid's should have taken one quiet carriage hour. It took 3 loud ones, because half the city was thirsty, the other half was curious, and Thimble refused to ride in a wagon unless offered a cushion. The dragon had reduced itself somehow, not to the tiny bracelet creature of Viola's childhood, but to the size of a very long pony with antlers. It flowed more than walked, sliding along gutters, fountain edges, and drainage channels with the offended elegance of a duchess forced to use a tradesman's entrance. Children ran beside it until it flicked droplets onto their noses. They shrieked with delight. It is encouraging riotous behavior, one guard complained. It is a water dragon, Cora said from the wagon bench. If you wanted quiet, you should have hired a turnip. Cora had invited herself along by climbing into the wagon and sitting on the map chest. You are not officially part of this party, Rowan's captain told her. Neither is the dragon, Cora said. Yet here we all are. Viola hid a smile in her sleeve. Silas rode beside the wagon on a black horse, so magnificent it looked carved from midnight and impatience. He did not speak often. That suited Viola because when he did speak, people listened, and when he did not, they wondered what he was about to do. It was a useful silence, the kind that made room rather than taking it. Rowan insisted on riding ahead with 6 wolf guards. Maribel rode in her own carriage behind them, wrapped in a borrowed cloak and an expression of private misery. Viola saw her staring at the dry public fountain in the Weaver Square. A little boy held a cup beneath the carved wolf mouth, waiting for drops that did not come. Maribel looked away first. Viola did not forgive her, but she noticed. At the convent gate, Mother Aloan waited with 20 sisters behind her. Age had bent her fingers, but not her spine. Her veil was white, her eyes black, and her mouth still looked capable of making bread confess. Viola, she said. Not lady. Not former queen. Not keeper. Just Viola, and suddenly the years between 9 and 30 seemed thin enough to step through. Viola curtsied. Mother. Thimble surged past her, climbed the convent fountain, and shoved its whole head into the water trough. Mother Aloan watched it drink. Still no manners, she said. The dragon lifted its head, water streaming from whiskers, and sneezed on a novice. And no repentance, the abbess added. Silas dismounted. The movement drew every novice eye in the courtyard. They tried to be holy about it and failed in silence. Mother Aloan's gaze moved over his armor. Lord Silas, your grandfather argued with me for 6 hours over a broken sluice. He lost, Silas said. Naturally. Viola almost smiled again. Rowan stepped forward. Mother Abbess, by authority of the crown, I require any maps of the old water veins. Do you? Mother Aloan said. Rowan frowned. He was unused to old women who did not flatten themselves before crowns. This had been one of Viola's favorite convent qualities. The city is in crisis, he said. The city has been in crisis many times, Mother Aloan replied. It is the crown that has only just noticed. Cora whispered, I like her. Maribel, who had stepped from her carriage, looked startled, then tried not to. Rowan's temper rose. Viola could see it in the set of his shoulders. Before he could speak, she moved between him and the abbess. Mother, someone has diverted the spring from the west side. The official maps are false or incomplete. The sacred basin is dry. The lower quarter will be out by evening. Mother Aloan's stern face changed. Not softened. Focused. Who stands to gain? Silas answered, "If Crownwell cannot prove lawful control of the spring by moonrise tomorrow, my house may reclaim the ancient wells under the Blackmere Covenant." The courtyard went very still. Rowan rounded on him. "You intended this." Silas's eyes cooled. "If I intended to take a city, Majesty, I would not begin by kneeling in front of its most competent woman with my gauntlet under her skirt." 3 novices made sounds like strangled bells. Viola felt heat climb her throat and hated that her body had chosen this moment to remember the scene so clearly. Mother Eloan looked at Viola. Viola looked at the fountain. Cora looked delighted. Rowan looked ready to bite iron. Maribel whispered, "His gauntlet was where?" "Later," Cora told her. Mother Eloan sighed as if surrounded by children, which, in spiritual terms, she was. "Come." She led them through the herb garden, past the repaired channel of Viola's childhood. When Viola was 9, that repaired channel had been her first true meeting with the Guardian. She had found the herb garden dying, fetched a kitchen spoon, 2 curtain cords, and every ribbon she owned, then dug in the mud until moonrise. A tiny jade blue head had risen from the dry channel and bitten the pink ribbon from her braid. Viola had screamed. The little creature had screamed back. By dawn the water ran clear, the herbs lifted their leaves, and the blue dragon slept around her wrist like a damp bracelet. It had never been a pet. Mother Eloan told her it was a water-vein guardian, ancient, proud, greedy for polished stones, and willing to cooperate only when humans respected the flow. Viola learned this when it helped repair a sluice, then stole a sausage from a visiting cannon and looked morally correct about it. Thimble abandoned the fountain and slid after them, pausing only to steal a polished brass knob from a door. A sister slapped its claw with a spoon. The dragon spat the knob back into her palm. "Do you see?" Viola murmured to Silas as they walked. "Limited cooperation. It appears fond of you. It once put a frog in my shoe because I forgot to clear pond moss. Affection varies by species. You sound experienced." His gaze lowered briefly to her mouth, then returned to the path. "I guard old dragons," he said. "I do not pretend to understand them." The air between them warmed despite the convent shade. Mother Eloan opened the embroidery room. The sisters gasped when she crossed to a faded wall hanging of St. Brigid pouring water from a pitcher. With a knife from her sleeve, the abbess cut the backing stitches. "Mother," a novice whispered, scandalized. "The saint will survive," Eloan said. She peeled the cloth apart. Hidden inside, stitched in blue and black thread, was a map of Crownwell's underground waters. Not a decorative map, a working one. Channels, floodgates, ancient seals, forgotten cisterns. Viola moved closer, heart pounding. There was the cathedral spring. There the West Mill Quarter. There the old Blackmere well beneath Dragon Gate. And between them, a channel marked with 3 crescent cuts. "That tunnel was sealed," Viola said. "It was meant to be," Eloan replied. Silas's finger hovered above the crescent marks. "A diversion gate." Cora leaned in so far her cap nearly brushed the cloth. "I have been there." Everyone turned. "You've been in the sealed diversion gate?" Viola asked. Cora shrugged. "Not through the proper arch. Through the eel chute." Maribel stared. "Why?" "It was raining and the laundry master was angry." "That explains very little." "To nobles, yes." Viola rested a hand on Cora's shoulder. "Can you find it again?" Cora looked at the map, then at Viola. Her sharp little face lost its joking edge. "If the water is going there, someone had to break the old lock. It is not easy. Takes iron men and time." "And authority," Silas said. Rowan's captain shifted. "Lord Malrek oversees the West Works." Rowan snapped. "Malrek is loyal." Viola did not answer. Lord Malrek had been Rowan's smiling advisor since the coronation, a thin man with jeweled rings and a voice like honey left too long in the sun. He praised every royal appetite and called every public repair expensive. Viola had once caught him moving funds from winter cistern lining to tournament banners. Rowan had called it a misunderstanding. Water, Viola thought, always remembers. Mother Eloan rolled the map. "I will come." Rowan blinked. "You will not." The abbess looked at him. "Your Majesty, I hid a water map inside a saint for 40 years. Did you mistake me for someone who waits for permission?" Cora grinned. Thimble made a sound like a kettle laughing. Silas took the rolled map and handed it to Viola, not Rowan. The gesture was small. The effect was not. Viola felt the weight of cloth, thread, and trust in her hands. For years she had carried keys no one noticed, ledgers no one thanked her for, warnings dismissed until disaster made them fashionable. Now an abbess, a water girl, an ancient dragon, and the most dangerous man in the kingdom were all looking at her as if her next sentence mattered. She breathed in. "We inspect the gate before dusk," she said. Quietly. No royal banners, no drums, no court gossip. Thimble belched. Mother Eloan glanced at the dragon. No sausage theft. The dragon looked away. Chapter 4 quietly lasted until the palace heard that a dragon, a former queen, a convent abbess, the dragon king, the current queen, a water girl, and one increasingly damp monarch were all going into the old mill quarter. By dusk the streets were packed. People did not cheer. Thirst changes the sound of a city. It made voices sharp and feet restless. Women stood with empty pitchers. Men argued over buckets. A baker held up 2 cracked loaves and shouted that dough would not rise on royal speeches. Children watched Thimble with bright, anxious hope, because children understand creatures before politics. Viola moved through them with the map under her cloak. She stopped often, not to promise what she could not guarantee, but to ask practical questions. When did your well slow? What color was the last water? Did the mill will turn this morning? Who saw carts near the sealed gate? The answers formed a pattern. Flow weakened just before dawn. Brown water at the lower wells. Mill will still at sunrise. 3 covered carts near Dragon Gate 2 nights ago. Men in royal work cloaks. Lord Malrek's seal on a permit. Rowan heard the name and grew more defensive each time. A seal can be forged, he said. Yes, Viola said. So can confidence. He glared. Silas, walking near enough that his cloak brushed hers in the crowded lane, made a low sound that might have been amusement. Do not encourage me, Viola murmured. I was admiring restraint. That is worse. His hand touched the small of her back to guide her around a broken cart wheel. The contact lasted a breath, no more. It was courteous, necessary, and enough to make every nerve under her skin turn traitor. She stepped forward quickly. Cora noticed, because of course she did. Mind the mud, Lady Viola, the girl said. Some people slip where the ground is not even wet. Viola gave her a look. Cora became fascinated by her bucket. The old mill quarter crouched at the west edge of Crownwell, where rich houses ended and useful buildings began. The air smelled of grain dust, tallow, and river mud. The sealed diversion gate lay behind a cooper's yard, hidden beneath a stone arch carved with 3 crescents. Ivy covered the seal. Someone had cut it recently. Silas crouched. Even in full armor, he moved with controlled strength rather than noise. He ran 2 fingers along the broken lock. Black iron, he said. Heavy tools. Not thieves. Viola knelt beside him. The ground was damp, though no water should have reached the surface. Fresh clay. Their shoulders touched. Neither moved. Her breath caught. His gaze turned to hers. In the fading light his face was almost too much to look at directly, all hard angles softened by something watchful and unsaid. She wondered, absurdly, if water could hear a heartbeat through stone. Then Thimble shoved its snout between them and sneezed. Warm mist blew Viola's braid into Silas's chest. Cora burst out laughing. Silas looked down at the dragon. That was unnecessary. Thimble flicked its whiskers. It disagrees, Viola said, trying to rescue her braid and dignity at the same time. Mother Eloan examined the arch. The old gate opens from below. The crescent lock turns only with the keeper's seal. Rowan's eyes narrowed. Then how was it opened? Viola touched the inner groove. Her fingertips came away gray. A false key, she said, or a damaged seal copied from old records. Maribel had been silent since they entered the quarter. Now she stepped nearer the arch. She wore a simpler gown borrowed from a lady in waiting, pale green with damp marks at the hem. Without jewels, she seemed less like a rival queen, and more like a young woman who had overdressed for a storm. Lord Malrek asked me about the old ceremony, she said. Rowan turned. When? 3 weeks ago. He said people loved ancient details. He asked what cup I would use, where I would stand, what hour the spring rose strongest. Viola watched her face. Maribel was frightened, but not performing. That was new. Did you tell him? Viola asked. Maribel lifted her chin. I did not know it mattered. Rowan's voice softened at once. You could not have known. Viola felt an old, tired pain. He had never said that to her when she warned him about Malrek. He had said she suspected everyone who enjoyed life. Silas looked at Viola, not Rowan. He did not pity her. Somehow that was kinder. Cora crouched at a drainage grate near the arch. Eel chute is open. Mother Aloan closed her eyes. Of course it is. What is an eel chute? Maribel asked. Cora grinned. A noblewoman's education has so many tragic gaps. The chute was a square opening behind the cooper's shed, wide enough for Cora, narrow enough to insult everyone else. It dropped into darkness with a smell of wet stone and fish. Silas looked at it, then at his shoulders. Cora patted his armored arm. You would block the whole kingdom, my lord. There is a lower maintenance stair, Viola said, checking the map. Locked from inside, Cora replied. Rowan folded his arms. Then we send the girl. Viola stood. No. Cora blinked at her. She is small enough, Rowan said. She is not a tool to push into darkness because the rest of us ate better. Cora's mouth opened. Closed. Her expression turned carefully blank, as if gratitude were a draft she did not want to catch. Silas removed his cloak and draped it over a barrel. There is another way. He took from his belt a flat black key, long as a dagger and carved with dragon scale marks. Blackmere wells connect to old gates. If the covenant still holds, this opens the lower stair. Rowan's voice sharpened. You carry a key to my city. No, Silas said. I carry a key to the water beneath it. Your city was built later. The crowd around the yard murmured. Rowan's face flushed. Viola stepped to the arch, use it. Silas held the key out. Not to the lock. To Viola. The murmurs changed. The guardian named you keeper, he said. I can lend access. I cannot take your place. The key lay across his palm, dark and heavy. Viola reached for it. Her fingers brushed his. The contact was brief and bare, but it sent a quiet shock through her, not the girlish flutter she remembered from courtship, but something deeper, warmer, more dangerous. A door opening under the ribs. She took the key. Rowan made a sound of disbelief. You trust her with Blackmere iron? Silas kept his eyes on Viola. Yes. There was no romance in the word. No vow, no poetry, no claim. That made it worse. It was plain trust in public, and Viola had forgotten how powerful that could be. She slid the key into the hidden lock at the base of the arch. The stone floor groaned. A stair opened downward. Thimble darted ahead, then backed up and shoved its head against Viola's hip. What? She whispered. The dragon pushed harder. Cora peered into the stair. Oh, it wants you behind the tall, handsome wall. Silas looked at Cora. For safety, she added, not sounding sorry. Viola handed the map to Mother Aloan, lifted her skirt clear of the mud, and descended into the old water throat of Crownwell with Silas one step below her and the city holding its breath above. Chapter 5. The lower stair was not a stair, so much as an argument with gravity. The steps were narrow, slick, and built for monks with small feet and firm opinions. Silas went first, one hand on the wall, the other lifted slightly behind him without asking for Viola's hand. The offer was there if she needed it, not pressed upon her. She lasted 9 steps before the stone betrayed her. Her boot slipped. Her body lurched forward. Silas turned and caught her at the waist as if she weighed no more than a shawl. For one breath she was held against him, her palms pressed to the black armor over his chest, his hands firm at her sides. The corridor was cold. He was not. Even through metal and cloth, he gave off a heat that made the dark feel smaller. Are you hurt? He asked. His face was close enough that she saw a tiny scar near his brow, pale against his skin, not ugly, only human. His eyes did not leave hers. Only my pride. It seems resilient. It has had exercise. His thumb moved once at her waist, perhaps by accident, perhaps by the kind of accident that has already made a decision. Viola's breath thinned. Above them, Cora called, If you two are finished respecting each other, the rest of us are aging. Silas released Viola slowly enough to make release another kind of touch. Viola looked upward. Cora, I control your wages. Then I respectfully age in silence. Mother Aloan's voice followed. She is not silent. I am improved, Cora said. The tunnel widened at the bottom into a round chamber cut from black stone. Channels entered from 3 directions. One carried a weak trickle. One was dry. One thundered behind a sealed grate, water rushing where it should not. Thimble pressed its body flat to the wet floor and chirped in distress. Viola knelt beside the wrong channel. The water smelled of clay and iron filings. This is the sacred flow. Silas held his lantern higher, diverted into the west drain. Cora crouched and stuck one finger in the water, then tasted it before anyone could stop her. Maribel gagged. Do not do that. Rich people trust labels. Poor people trust tongues. Cora spat. River mud, lamp oil, and something bitter. Mother Eloan examined the wall. The bitter may be sleep poppy. To slow the guardian. Thimble sneezed miserably, producing only a sad bubble. Viola's anger sharpened. Someone had not merely stolen water. Someone had drugged an ancient creature so the spring would fail during Maribel's ceremony, so blame would scatter like spilled grain, so Rowan would panic, so Blackmere law would threaten the city, so whoever offered a solution would own them all. Malrek, she said. Rowan's captain, who had followed them with 2 guards, shifted uncomfortably. Rowan himself had refused the stare after seeing the drop, claiming he needed to calm the crowd above. It was the sort of royal decision that sounded noble if one ignored the stares. Silas touched the sealed grate. This was open from the main control room. We need the wheel chamber. Cora pointed to a crawl space barely larger than a bread oven. That way. Everyone looked at Silas. He looked at Cora. No, Viola said again. Cora rolled her eyes. Lady, I like being defended, truly, it has a nice warm feel, but if you keep protecting me from small spaces, this city dies thirsty, and I remain short for no purpose. Viola studied her. Can you do it safely? I can do it quickly. Safely costs extra. Silas removed a small horn whistle from his belt and handed it to Cora. If you see men, danger, or a locked gate, blow this. Cora weighed the whistle. What if I see rats? Are they armed? In my experience, spiritually. Silas's mouth twitched. Blow it twice. Cora grinned and vanished into the crawl space with a candle in her teeth before Viola could change her mind. Waiting in the chamber was worse than moving. Water roared behind the grate. Thimble crawled into Viola's lap as much as a pony-sized dragon could, laying its head across her knees and making pathetic kettle noises. You are too large for this, Viola whispered, stroking the wet fin along its neck. It nudged her hand. The fin was soft as moss. Beneath it the scales were cool, each one edged in silver. Thimble's eyes closed halfway. For all its ancient temper, it still liked having the place between its horns rubbed. That, at least, had not changed. Maribel stood apart, arms wrapped around herself. Her gaze followed Viola's hand on the dragon. It loves you, she said quietly. It tolerates me. There is a difference? A large one. Ask anyone who has been married. The words left Viola before she could polish them. Maribel flinched. Silas turned his lantern slightly, enough to give them privacy without pretending not to hear. Maribel swallowed. I did not know he would set you so low. Viola looked at her. You knew he was setting me aside. Yes. Then you knew enough to begin. Maribel's mouth tightened. For a moment Viola saw the rival queen, proud and jeweled. Then the pride cracked. My father owed half Rosemere to lenders. Rowan offered settlement if I married him. He was kind to me. He said you had never been happy with court life, that you would prefer freedom. Viola let out a soft breath. Freedom with a laundry court view. I believed what helped me sleep. That was not an apology. It was not forgiveness. It was something more useful than both at that moment. It was a piece of truth. Before Viola could answer, the horn whistle shrieked from the crawl space. Once. Twice. Then a third time, long and frantic. Silas moved before the echo faded. He shoved the lantern into Mother Eloan's hand, dropped to one knee, and reached into the crawl space. Cora! A crash sounded beyond the wall. Men shouted. Cora shot out of the crawl space backward, grabbed by her own belt in Silas's fist. She tumbled across the floor, filthy, wide-eyed, and still clutching the whistle. Armed rats, she gasped. Men too. An iron bolt slammed through the crawl space and struck the opposite wall. Silas shoved Viola behind him. The movement was pure instinct, fast and fierce. His body became a barrier, his cloak sweeping across her skirts. Viola grabbed a fallen maintenance hook from the floor. Silas glanced back. Stay behind me. I am behind you with a hook. Good. The first attacker crawled through the opening, a masked man with a short blade. Thimble, who had seemed drugged and sad, suddenly sprang up with offended energy and blasted a stream of warm water directly into his face. He yelped, slipped, and wedged himself in the crawl space, legs kicking. Cora leaned over him. Should have sent a smaller villain. 2 more men tried to force through. Silas seized the first by the collar and pulled him into the chamber with such controlled violence that the man landed in a sitting position of deep regret. Viola swung the hook at the second man's wrist. He dropped his blade and howled. She stared at the hook, then at him. I warned myself not to be dramatic today, she said. Mother Aloan hit the third attacker with the lantern pole. Maribel, pale but furious, grabbed a bucket from the wall and brought it down over the wedged man's head. It rang like a bell. Everyone stopped for half a second. Maribel stared at the bucket. I panicked, Cora said beautifully. Silas pinned the sitting attacker with one armored boot. Who sent you? The man spat. Thimble inhaled. Wait, Viola said. The dragon waited with cheeks puffed. The man looked at the dragon, then at the bucket still on his friend's head. Lord Malrek. Silas nodded. Wise answer. Thimble exhaled gently, producing only one warm bubble that landed on the man's nose. Cora looked disappointed. The wheel chamber, Viola said. Can we reach it? Cora pushed hair from her eyes. Yes, but Malrek's men are there. And something worse. Silas lifted his lantern. What? Cora swallowed. They built a dam inside the city. Chapter 6. The dam in the wheel chamber was an insult to water and a compliment to treachery. It stood where no dam should be, a black timber barrier wedged across the old channel, braced with iron, sealed with clay, and guarded by 6 men in royal work cloaks. Behind it the sacred flow hammered against the boards, forced through a side chute toward the west drain. Every strike shook the chamber. Every stolen gallon ran away from Crownwell's public wells. Lord Malrek stood on a platform above the water with a clean cloak and dirty hands. He was thin, elegant, and dry, which made Viola hate him more. His rings glittered in lantern light. His face carried the mild annoyance of a man interrupted during a private meal, not a crime. Lady Viola, he called. You always did arrive where you were least wanted. Silas stepped into the chamber beside her. And you built where you were least permitted. Malrek's eyes moved over Silas and paused. Fear entered, then vanished under polish. Lord Blackmere, how fortunate. You may witness how fragile Crownwell's claim has become. By law, when the sacred flow fails, Blackmere may reclaim the old wells. Unless, of course, the Crown accepts my emergency commission to manage distribution. Viola understood then. The plan had 2 jaws. If Rowan accepted Malrek's commission, Malrek controlled city water through the Crown. If Rowan refused and failed to restore the spring, Silas's house could reclaim the ancient wells, and Crownwell would turn against either the king or Blackmere. In the panic, Malrek could sell loyalty to the highest fear. You drugged the Guardian, Viola said. Malrek smiled. Old things sleep deeply. Thimble bared its teeth. Not deeply enough, Cora muttered. Malrek looked down at Cora. Ah, the bucket rat. Cora smiled brightly. Ah, the tall weasel. One guard laughed before remembering his side. Malrek's smile thinned. Take them. The guards moved. The fight was not elegant. It was too wet, too crowded, too full of old machinery. Silas was terrifying in the narrow space. He did not thrash. He did not roar. He struck with brutal economy, disarming one man, driving another backward into a wheel trough, sending a third into a pile of soaked clay with a sound like pudding surrendering. Viola was not trained for battle. She was trained for kitchens, ledgers, sick rooms, and doors that stuck in winter. This proved surprisingly useful. She slammed a gate latch onto a guard's fingers, kicked a clay bucket under another's feet, and used the maintenance hook to drag a lever out of reach. Mother Aloan stood at the stair with a broken pole, like an avenging saint. Maribel grabbed the hem of her borrowed gown, climbed onto a crate, and shouted, By order of the Queen, stop assisting treason. No one stopped. Cora looked up at her. Maybe add wages? By order of the Queen, stop assisting treason, and you will be paid. 2 guards hesitated. Malrek shouted, Idiots. Thimble chose that moment to scramble up the side of the dam. Its claws slipped on wet timber. Its back legs paddled in the air. It looked less like an ancient guardian, and more like a very determined blue carpet trying to climb a wall. Viola's fear cracked into laughter. Use the side brace. Thimble hissed at her, then used the side brace. Silas, between 2 guards, looked briefly at the dragon and shook his head. Ancient terror of the rivers. Limited cooperation, Viola reminded him. Malrek saw Thimble reach the top of the dam. He seized a long iron rod and slammed it against a release pin. The whole barrier shuddered. If I cannot sell the water, he snarled, polish gone, I will drown the west quarter and blame your meddling. Viola's blood went cold. The dam was not merely diverting water. It was holding pressure. If the wrong side broke, the old mill lanes would flood. Silas lunged toward the platform. Two guards tackled him at once. He hit the boards hard, rolled, and threw one off, but the delay was enough. Malrek pulled the pin. Water thundered. The side chute burst open. "Cora!" Viola shouted. "Where is the counter wheel?" Cora pointed across the chamber to a rusted wheel above a narrow ledge. "There, but it needs 2 hands and a prayer." Viola ran. The ledge was slick. Water roared below. She reached the wheel, grabbed it, and pulled. It did not move. Silas saw her from across the chamber. "Viola!" He fought toward her, but a guard with a hooked blade blocked him. Viola planted both feet and pulled again. Pain shot through her shoulders. The wheel groaned, then stuck. Malrek laughed. Maribel, still on the crate, took off one jeweled shoe and threw it at him. It struck his forehead with a magnificent crack. Malrek staggered. "You little fool." "That was my wedding shoe," Maribel snapped. "It finally served a purpose." Cora leapt onto the ledge beside Viola. "Together. It may throw us." "Then aim me at Malrek." They pulled. The wheel screamed. Mother Eloin began praying in a tone that sounded like an order. Thimble clamped its jaws on the damn rope and yanked backward with all 4 claws braced. Its eyes bulged. Its whiskers shook. It made a muffled growl that sounded very much like a person trying to move a wardrobe alone. Silas broke through the last guard, reached the ledge, and put his hands over Viola's and Cora's on the wheel. His chest pressed against Viola's back. Heat, armor, breath, force. "Now," he said at her ear. They pulled. The wheel turned. The counter gate dropped with a thunderclap. Water surged into the correct channel, not fully, but enough to relieve the pressure. The side chute collapsed inward. A wave burst across the platform, swept Malrek off his feet, and deposited him into a shallow clay pit beside the dam. He sat up covered from neck to boot in gray mud. Cora leaned over the ledge. "My lord, your emergency commission is running down your collar." The captured guards began laughing. Then, realizing they were still captured, tried to turn it into coughing. Silas's hands remained over Viola's. The wheel had stopped. The danger had passed for the moment. His breath touched the side of her neck. "Are you hurt?" he asked again. It was becoming a habit. "No. You ran toward a floodgate. You ran toward me." The words hung there, dangerous and simple. His grip tightened once around her fingers. "Yes." Viola turned enough to look at him. The chamber around them was chaos, shouting guards, muddy traitors, a dragon trying to spit out a rope, Maribel demanding her shoe back, Cora laughing so hard she nearly slipped, Mother Eloin scolding everyone for surviving loudly. In the middle of it, Silas looked at Viola as if the whole world had narrowed to her pulse under his hand. Then Thimble, still chewing rope, crawled between them and rubbed its wet head against Silas's armored thigh. Silas looked down. "It is heating my greave." Steam rose from his leg armor. Viola pressed her lips together. "Do not laugh," Silas said. "I am considering the dignity of Blackmere. It is blistering." She laughed then, helplessly, and because the water was not saved yet, because Malrek was not fully beaten, because Rowan would make everything harder, because her own heart had just made an alarming turn toward a man who calmly used himself as a wall, the laughter felt like rebellion. Chapter 7. By dawn, with Malrek muddy in custody and the city still thirsty, Viola followed the old map to the next source. The Blackmere well stood beyond Dragon Gate, under a hill of dark pines and old stones. At dawn, mist lay low over the fields. The road from Crownwell was lined with people carrying empty pitchers, not demanding, not cheering, just watching. Viola saw hope and accusation in equal measure. If she failed, they would remember the dragon throwing the crown to her feet, and decide ancient creatures could be wrong. Silas rode beside her. He had offered a horse from his own stable, a silver mare with a calm eye and a saddle fit for someone who might need to dismount quickly. Viola accepted because walking beside a 210-centimeter man on a war horse made even practical women feel like decorative luggage. Thimble refused the road. It flowed through roadside ditches, occasionally popping up to inspect puddles, once terrifying a shepherd by emerging from his watering trough with a frog on its head. The frog remained there for nearly a mile. Thimble seemed proud of it. Cora rode behind Mother Eloin in a cart and pretended not to enjoy herself. Maribel came in a plain cloak, over Rowan's objection. Rowan came because he could not allow Maribel to appear braver, and because jealousy is a saddle that fits badly but is still worn. At Dragon Gate, the Blackmere household waited. Viola saw at once why Silas had said little about his family rights. The old well was not a simple hole in stone. It was a fortress of water. 3 black towers rose around a circular courtyard. Iron channels ran through the walls. Dragon statues watched from every arch, not decorative but warning. Beneath the central grate, water sounded deep and powerful. An elderly steward bowed to Silas, then looked at Viola with careful uncertainty. Lady Keeper, Silas said before anyone else could choose a lesser title. The steward bowed again lower. Rowan made a soft sound of annoyance. The Blackmere family council waited in the well house, 3 cousins and an aunt with silver pins in her hair. They were polite to Viola, cold to Rowan, and sharp with Silas. The covenant gives us lawful claim by sunset, said Cousin Arlen, a handsome man with a mouth trained in disapproval. If Crownwell Spring fails, Blackmere must protect its own water. Protect or profit? Viola asked. Arlen blinked. He had expected gratitude or fear, not questions. Silas stood behind the council table. Lady Viola will inspect the deep gate. His aunt, Lady Nerissa, watched him closely. And if she confirms the crown has lost lawful control? Silas did not look away. Then we will decide what honor requires. Honor is expensive. So is a city riot. Cora whispered to Mother Eloan. Rich people argue like knives and napkins. Mother Eloan whispered back, and poor girls listened too loudly. The deep gate lay beneath the well house, down a spiral stair wide enough for Silas at last. Viola walked with the Blackmere key at her belt. She could feel Rowan's gaze on it. Could feel Silas's gaze on Rowan. There it was, the dark little possessiveness he kept behind discipline. Not a claim on her body. Not a demand. Something more dangerous because it was leashed. When Rowan walked too near, Silas grew quieter. When Rowan spoke to her in that old, almost tender voice, Silas's jaw set. Viola should have found it troubling. Instead she found herself warmed by the knowledge that this powerful man did not like seeing her hurt and was trying, with visible effort, not to make that her problem. At the bottom of the stair, the deep gate waited. It was a round bronze door set into stone, carved with waves and wolves and dragons from a time when kingdoms remembered needing each other. 3 locks marked its edge. 1 was open. 2 were sealed with fresh black pitch. Viola touched the pitch. This is new. Silas's face darkened. No one in my household authorized this. Rowan scoffed. Convenient. Silas turned his head slowly. Viola stepped between their lines of anger. The pitch contains poppy bitter. Same as the drugged water. Cora leaned in and sniffed. Also pine tar from West Yards. Lady Nerissa, who had followed them down with a lantern, frowned. Our stores use cedar. Then Malrek had help from someone with access to both Royal Work crews and outer Blackmere roads, Viola said. Mother Eloan studied the carved gate. There should be a keeper's socket. Viola found it under a fold of bronze waves. A small hollow shaped like a crescent and a dragon claw. The Blackmere key fit half of it. The other half was empty. Thimble, now small enough to curl around the stair rail, slid down and pressed its snout to Viola's bodice. Do not start, she said. It nudged the old pendant she wore beneath her gown. A simple silver disc from the convent, scratched and plain, something she had kept through marriage and humiliation because Mother Eloan had given it to her when she left. Viola drew it out. Mother Eloan went very still. Mother, Viola said carefully. The abbess sighed. I wondered when the guardian would mention that. Rowan stared. You hit a seal on my wife? Former wife, Maribel said quietly. No one expected her to say it. Rowan looked stung. Mother Eloan reached for the pendant. This is the old water seal. Not royal, not Blackmere. It belonged to the keepers who served before crowns divided wells into pride. I gave it to Viola because she repaired water without asking who owned it. Viola's chest tightened. You could have told me. You were 16 and marrying a prince. If I had said you carried authority older than his crown, you might have tried to use it before anyone was ready to survive the consequences. That is infuriatingly reasonable. I have practiced. The seal fit the empty socket. The gate gave a deep click. But before Viola could turn the key, Rowan caught her wrist. Not hard at first. Hard enough to remember he had once been allowed. Think, he said. His voice had lowered into the intimate register that used to undo her when they were young. If you open that gate with Blackmere beside you, the city will see you as theirs. Come back to the palace. We can restore order together. Viola stared at his hand on her wrist. Silas took 1 step. The whole chamber seemed to take that step with him. Viola lifted her free hand slightly, and Silas stopped. Barely. She saw the restraint in his shoulders. Then she looked at Rowan. Together, she said, is a word you remember when there are witnesses. Rowan flinched. Viola, I made mistakes. No. You made choices and left me to repair their consequences. His grip tightened. Pain sparked. This time she did not twist away with a market trick. She brought her knee up. Not high. Not savage. Practical. Rowan released her with a strangled sound and folded forward, just enough for Thimble to blast him in the chest with water. The king sat down hard on the stair. Cora winced. That looked educational. Silas's expression was carved from stone, except his eyes were bright with violent approval. Viola turned the key. The deep gate opened. Water roared beyond it, but not toward Crownwell. A second barrier had been lowered in the natural river throat, a massive stone plug wedged with iron chains. On the far side, the river hammered uselessly, trapped under the hill. Silas swore softly. Lady Nerissa crossed herself. That plug predates the covenant. It was never meant to move. Someone moved it enough to drop, Viola said. How? The answer came from above, where bells began ringing in Crownwell. Not alarm bells. Trial bells. Mother Eloan turned pale. Malrek is being brought before the council early. Rowan stood, still dripping. Good. We return and force a confession. Viola looked through the open gate at the trapped river. The stone plug would take hours to raise, perhaps days without proper crews. Malrek's early trial was not justice. It was distraction. If the council condemned him alone, the deeper sabotage remained. At sunset, the covenant failed anyway. Silas looked at the chains. We can raise it. How long? With my men, maybe until nightfall. Covenant sunset is before that. Silas's face gave nothing away, but she saw the calculations strike him. Law, family, city, her. All converging like flood channels. Lady Nerissa said quietly, Silas, if sunset passes, Blackmere can reclaim everything without blood. Our people would be secure for generations. Rowan wiped water from his face. There. The truth. Viola looked at Silas. He looked back at her, and for the first time she saw the cost of his restraint. Chapter 8. The public trial of Lord Malrek began at midday in the palace judgment hall, 6 hours before covenant sunset, 4 hours before the lower wells would run dry, and 10 minutes before Thimble disgraced a duke. The disgrace was not planned. The duke wore a hat with 3 white plumes, and Thimble, stressed by poisoned water and legal delays, mistook it for a hostile bird. It leapt from behind Viola, seized the plumes, and dragged the hat under a bench. The duke shouted. Thimble growled through feathers. Cora crawled under the bench and whispered, Release the bird. It died before you got here. The hall, packed with nobles, guild heads, priests, merchants, and thirsty citizens admitted by public demand, watched in strained fascination. Silas stood beside Viola at the center. He had sent riders to Blackmere for engineers, ropes, and chain teams, but everyone knew time was against them. Rowan sat on the judgment chair with Maribel beside him. The crown lay between them, unworn. Malrek entered in clean clothes, which Viola considered an insult to truth. He had bathed, changed, and regained his smile. Mud had made him ridiculous. Polish made him dangerous. My lord, Rowan said, voice hard, you are accused of unlawful diversion, armed assault, and endangering the West Quarter. Malrek bowed. I am accused by a discarded wife, a foreign lord with water claims, a convent relic, and a girl who sleeps in drainage tunnels. Cora lifted a hand. Only when rent rises. Laughter rippled. Malrek's eyes sharpened. He changed tactics. Yes, I opened the old gate. By emergency necessity. Crownwell's water system was neglected for years. Viola felt the blow before he aimed it. He turned to the hall. Who oversaw those ledgers? Lady Viola. Who commanded repairs? Lady Viola. Who had access to convent maps hidden from the crown? Lady Viola. And who now stands with Blackmere, ready to hand our wells to a man whose family profits from our failure? The hall murmured. Rowan's face worked. It would be easy for him to accept this version. It hurt his pride less than admitting he ignored warnings. Silas stepped forward. Viola touched his sleeve. He stopped. She did not want to be saved from this. She wanted to answer it. Lord Malrek, she said, you are correct that I oversaw water ledgers. You are correct that I had access to old rights. You are correct that I warned the crown often enough for you to find me tiresome. He smiled faintly. You are incorrect about neglect. She turned to Cora. Bring the winter ledgers. Cora darted to a side table and returned with books tied in blue cloth. Viola opened them for the hall. Here are the repairs requested for the West Channel 3 years ago. Denied by Council Finance after Lord Maurek recommended tournament expansion. She opened another. Here are the lower cistern linings delayed 2 years ago after Lord Maurek promised a private donor for palace fountains. Another. Here are the sealed gate inspections I requested last winter. The seal bearing the refusal is his. Maurek's smile thinned. Paper can be arranged. So can water. Viola nodded to Mother Aloan. The abbess and 2 sisters rolled in a covered trough on a cart. The hall craned to see. Viola lifted the cloth. Inside were 3 glass bowls of water. One clear, one brown, one faintly gray. Water from the cathedral spring before the ceremony, preserved for blessing. Water from the diverted West Channel. Water from the Blackmere Deep Gate after we opened it this morning. Maurek looked bored. And water touched by the same tampering remembers. Thimble crawled from beneath the bench with feathers stuck to its whiskers. It sniffed the bowls. Viola laid a hand between its horns. Show them, she whispered. The dragon huffed mist across the bowls. Images formed in the air. Not clear as a painting, but clear enough. Maurek's rings over the gate pin. Men in royal cloaks pouring bitter liquid into the water. A second figure at the Blackmere Deep Gate, hooded, lowering the ancient stone plug. The hall gasped. Who is that? Rowan demanded. The image wavered. The hooded figure turned slightly. A signet flashed. Not Maurek's ring. A wolf head split by a lily. Maribel made a sound. Viola looked at her. Rosemere, Maribel whispered. My father's seal. The hall erupted. Rowan stood. Your father? Maribel's face had gone white. He told me he sent men to help prepare road pageantry. I did not know. Maurek began to laugh. It was the wrong laugh. Too relieved. Viola understood. Lord Rosemere was useful, indebted, easy to blame. Maurek had arranged the path through him, perhaps promised money, perhaps threatened exposure. If the trial ended with Rosemere's guilt, Maurek might still claim he acted under noble instruction. Where is Lord Rosemere? Viola asked. Maribel whispered. He left court before dawn. Cora shot upright. West Road. I do not know. Cora looked at Viola. The West Road crosses the old flood bridge. If he carries the second chain key, he can drop the whole plug lock into the deep river. Then no one raises it by sunset. Silas turned to his steward. Horse teams. Now. Rowan came down from the dais. I ride. Viola shook her head. No. You stay and hold Maurek. I am king. Then act like the nail that holds the board, not the hammer looking for noise. The hall went silent. Rowan looked as if she had struck him again. Silas's mouth almost moved. Mother Aloan looked proud enough to be dangerous. Maribel stepped down, shaking but firm. I can identify my father's men. Rowan grabbed her arm. You are not going. Maribel looked at his hand. Viola watched recognition cross the younger woman's face, the unpleasant kind that arrives late and still saves something. Remove your hand, Maribel said. Rowan did not. Maribel lifted her jeweled shoe, the remaining one, and brought the heel down on his instep. Rowan let go with another yelp. Cora whispered, It is spreading. The hall laughed, but softer this time. The joke had teeth. Viola took Maribel's hand. It was cold. Come, Viola said. Silas moved to her other side. We leave by the lower gate. Faster. Thimble bounded after them, feathers still attached. Behind them Rowan shouted orders. Maurek shouted innocence. The council shouted over both. The whole palace became noise. But Viola was already running toward the road, the Blackmere key at her belt, the old seal warm at her throat, and a strange new feeling in her chest. Not hope. Hope was too soft. Purpose. Chapter 9. The ride to the old flood bridge should have taken half an hour. Silas made it in 12 minutes, and somehow kept Viola alive. She rode behind him because the lower gate held only 3 saddled horses, and his black war horse was the fastest creature present that was not an ancient water guardian with a feather problem. Silas lifted her up as if she were made of moonlight, swung into the saddle before her, and pulled her close with one arm around her waist. Hold on, he said. To what? He looked back. Me. There were answers a sensible woman should give. Viola wrapped both arms around him. The horse launched forward. Crownwell blurred. Streets, gates, shouting guards, startled chickens, all gone behind them. Viola pressed against Silas's back, feeling the controlled power of him through dark riding leather. His arm locked over hers at each turn. Wind tore pins from her hair until the golden braid loosened, streaming behind her like a banner. She should have been terrified. She was, but not only of speed. At the first bend, the horse leapt a broken cart. Viola gasped and tightened her grip. Silas's hand covered hers at his waist. "I have you." 3 words. Dangerous as floodwater. Behind them rode Maribel with one Blackmere guard, Mother Eloan in a rattling cart she had commandeered from a monk, and Cora clinging to the cart rail while yelling instructions no one had requested. Thimble flowed through the roadside ditch beside them, now long and bright, keeping pace by diving through puddles that should not have connected, but apparently did when a dragon was in a hurry. The old flood bridge crossed a ravine west of the city. Beneath it, the hidden deep river roared through a stone throat. A maintenance tower stood at one end, ancient and narrow, with chain wheels visible through broken windows. Men were already there, 4 riders bearing Rosemere colors, 2 of Malrek's work guards, and Lord Rosemere himself, Maribel's father, a handsome older man without enough courage in his face. He stood by the chain while holding a bronze key. Maribel slid from her horse before it fully stopped. "Father!" Lord Rosemere turned. Relief and shame fought across his features. Shame lost. "Go back," he called. "You do not understand." "Then explain quickly," she shouted, voice breaking. "Before you drown a city." He looked at Viola, then Silas. "Malrek said the Dragon King would take the wells. He said if I helped secure the deep plug, Rowan would need Rosemere men to restore it. My debts would be cleared. My daughter would be safe." Maribel laughed once. It hurt to hear. "Safe? I was bait in pearls." Malrek's guards moved toward the chain wheel. Silas drew his sword. Everything happened at once. The guards charged. The Blackmere riders met them. Steel rang. Horses screamed. Lord Rosemere backed toward the wheel with the key. Viola ran after Maribel, who ran after her father. "Do not drop it!" Viola shouted. Rosemere held the key over the ravine. "I had no choice." Viola stopped 10 feet away. The wind whipped her hair across her face. There is always a choice. Some are only more expensive than cowardice. His hand shook. Maribel reached for him. "Father, please." One of Malrek's guards broke from the fight and lunged toward Viola. She saw him too late. Silas did not. He crossed the bridge like a black storm, caught the guard by the back of his collar, and slammed him against the stone parapet hard enough to make every bad idea leave his body. The man slid down groaning. Silas turned to Viola, eyes blazing. "Behind me." This time she did not argue, because another guard was coming and she had enough sense to enjoy being alive. But the true danger was not the guards. Lord Rosemere, frightened by Silas's violence and his own ruin, stumbled. The key slipped. Maribel screamed. Viola lunged. She caught Rosemere's sleeve with one hand and the chain rail with the other. The bronze key struck the bridge stones, bounced, and slid toward a gap. Cora appeared from nowhere, threw herself flat on the bridge, and slapped both hands over it. "Mine," she said breathlessly. The bridge shook. In the tower, one of Malrek's men had reached the secondary lever. He threw it down. The chain wheel spun wild. The deep plug below began to drop farther, grinding into the river throat. If it locked fully, the trapped water would either burst elsewhere or remain sealed until well after Covenant sunset. Silas looked at the wheel, then at Viola. The chain must be stopped from below. How? He pointed to a narrow maintenance ladder descending the side of the ravine. Cora stood, clutching the key. "Absolutely not. That ladder is older than the abyss." Mother Eloan, arriving with the cart, shouted, "Less commentary, more rope." Thimble surged from the ravine mist and wrapped itself around the bridge support. Its blue scales flashed in the spray. It bit the spinning chain. The chain slowed but did not stop. Silas grabbed a rope from a rider. "I can reach the lower brace." "The brace needs the keeper's seal," Viola said. "Then we both go." Rowan would have said no, because the danger belonged to men. Silas looked at the danger and counted the tools needed. They tied the rope around Silas first, then Viola. He descended the ladder ahead of her, testing each rung. Spray soaked them. The river roared below like a beast under stone. Halfway down, the ladder cracked. Viola's boot slipped. Silas caught her calf with one hand and the ladder with the other. "Easy. I am beginning to dislike stairs. This is a ladder. I dislike its family." His laugh was brief and beautiful, stolen by the spray. They reached the lower brace, a bronze socket built into the ravine wall beside the grinding chain. Thimble's jaws held the links above them, eyes squeezed shut with effort. Viola inserted the old seal. Silas inserted the Blackmere key beside it. "Together," he said. She looked at him. The word did not hurt from his mouth. They turned. The brace locked. The chain stopped. Thimble released it and immediately sneezed a blast of steam that shot upward through the bridge planks. Above, men shouted as warm mist filled the tower. Cora's voice carried down. "It got Lord Rosemere's trousers." Maribel's voice followed. "Good." The river surged against the loosened plug. Not free yet, but no longer worsening. Silas braced one arm around Viola as the latter trembled. Their faces were inches apart in the spray. Her hair clung to her cheeks. His dark lashes were wet. The world below was thunder, the world above battle, and between them was a ledge too narrow for lies. "I want to kiss you," he said. Viola forgot the river for one reckless second. His jaw tightened. "But not here, because danger makes thieves of judgment, and you have had enough choices stolen." That should have calmed her. It did the opposite. She gripped his collar, pulled herself closer, and kissed him. It was not gentle at first. It was rain, hunger, shock, a year of swallowed insults, a morning of broken marble, every locked door opening at once. Silas went still for the length of a heartbeat. Then his arm tightened around her waist, fierce and careful together, and he kissed her back as if the river had found a second current. Above them, Cora shouted, "I cannot see, but I am making assumptions." Viola broke the kiss against Silas's mouth, laughing and breathless. Silas rested his forehead against hers. "Your assistant is observant. She is unbearable." "She is correct." The rope tightened from above. They began to climb back, soaked, bruised, alive, and changed in a way no court decree could undo. Chapter 10. By late afternoon, Crownwell had the whole shape of the crime. Lord Malrek had used Rosemere debts, royal work crews, forged access seals, and old Blackmere roads to divert the sacred spring, drug the Guardian, and force a covenant crisis. Lord Rosemere, greedy for rescue and afraid for his house, had helped lower the deep plug. Rowan, proud and careless, had placed the city works in Malrek's hands despite repeated warnings. Maribel, vain and desperate to be loved as queen, had supplied ceremonial details without understanding the trap. Blackmere law, ancient and sharp, had given the plot its deadline. None of that restored the water. The deep plug remained lodged. The city wells were failing. Sunset approached. The Blackmere engineers arrived with chain teams, oxen, pulleys, and grim faces. They worked at the old flood bridge while Viola coordinated crews between the bridge, the mill gate, and the cathedral spring. Cora ran messages through shortcuts no adult could fit. Mother Eloan commanded volunteers with terrifying efficiency. Maribel sold her pearl sleeves to a merchant on the spot for wages to pay extra laborers, then demanded the sleeves back until the pearls were removed because she was growing, not dead. Thimble helped by swimming between channels, and occasionally by stealing tools it believed were placed incorrectly. At the palace, Rowan called an emergency council. Viola arrived covered in spray and mud. Silas came beside her, equally wet, his hand bandaged where the chain had burned through his glove. He did not hide the injury. He also did not mention it. This irritated her. "Sit," she told him in the council antechamber. "There is no time. There is enough time to wrap a burn before you use that hand again. It is minor." She took his wrist. He stopped. The hallway around them was full of runners, shouting pages, and clanging buckets. Still, the moment narrowed. His pulse beat under her fingers. She unwrapped the hasty bandage. The skin across his palm was red and blistered. "Minor," she repeated. "I have had worse." That is not a medical argument. It is a confession of poor supervision. His mouth curved. She cleaned the burn with water from her own flask and wrapped it properly. His eyes stayed on her face, too steady for her balance. "You kissed me over a ravine," he said. "You complained about the location. I complained before the kiss. Afterward, I became philosophical." She tied the bandage tighter than necessary. He did not flinch. "I have no room in my life for a man who thinks helping me means owning the answer," she said. "Good. Good. I do not want the answer. I want the woman who keeps finding doors." Heat rose in her cheeks. "You are inconveniently skilled at saying things. Only to you." The simplicity of it unsettled her more than any practiced charm. There was no courtly game, no wide smile thrown around the room to see who caught it. Silas's attention, once given, felt like a private weather. The council doors opened. Rowan stood inside with the crown before him, Malrek in chains to one side, and Lord Rosemere guarded on the other. Maribel stood near her father, but not with him. That distinction mattered. Lady Nerissa of Blackmere waited by the table with a parchment in her hand. Viola knew what it was before anyone spoke. The covenant claim. Lady Nerissa turned to Silas. Sunset is less than an hour away. If the spring is not restored, Blackmere lawfully reclaims the ancient wells. We have prepared the notice. Rowan struck the table. You see? Vultures. Silas said nothing. Lady Nerissa's face did not soften. I am protecting our house. If Crownwell riots, our villages suffer. If we do nothing, our own wells become bargaining chips. Honor cannot water children. Viola respected her for saying it plainly. She hated the truth of it. All eyes moved to Silas. He took the parchment from Lady Nerissa. For a moment, no one breathed. Then he tore it in half. Lady Nerissa gasped. Rowan stared. Silas tore it again. And again. Pieces fell to the council floor like dry leaves. Blackmere will not reclaim Crownwell's wells under sabotage, he said. The ancient claim is suspended until the Public Water Council completes investigation and repair. Lady Nerissa went pale with fury. You have no authority to dissolve family right. I have authority to refuse my signature. This will cost us. Then I will pay. Rowan barked a laugh. Noble speech. You give away leverage so she smiles at you. Silas turned on him so sharply the room cooled. No. I give away leverage because your city is thirsty, and she is trying to save it while you count what her gratitude might cost. Do not confuse your habits with mine. The words landed like a blade in wood. Rowan's face changed. For 1 second Viola saw the boy he had been before the crown, ashamed and angry because shame had nowhere graceful to stand. Malrek, chained but smiling, spoke from the side. How touching. Yet if the plug remains lodged, by morning this generosity becomes a corpse with manners. Viola looked at him. He knew something. The plug can be raised, she said. With the upper chain, yes. Assuming the lower lock remains intact. Cora burst through the council door, breathless, hair wild. It does not. Every head turned. Malrek's last man broke the lower lock from inside the bridge tower before we caught him, she said. The chain holds, but the old brace is cracked. If the oxen pull too hard, the whole plug falls and seals. If they do not pull, it stays stuck. Malrek smiled. Viola's mind raced. Water under stone. Water under crown. The plug had 2 forces on it, chain above, river behind. If the chain could not pull, the river might push. But the river was trapped at the wrong angle. It needed release from the mill diversion. The dam had partially redirected flow. If opened fully at the precise moment, water from the sacred channel could strike the back pressure and lift the plug. Risky. Dangerous. Not a small clue. A whole city-sized event. The mill gate, she said. Silas followed instantly. If we open the restored channel and the deep brace together, the pressure reverses. Lady Nerissa said, or the west quarter floods. Not if the spill arches are clear, Cora said. Mother Eloan, entering behind her, held up another strip from the map. They are under St. Orla's laundry. Cora groaned. Of course. I hate that laundry. Viola turned to Rowan. Evacuate the west quarter lanes below the mill. Open the market square as high ground. Send every bell ringer. No pride, no delay. Rowan stared at her. Majesty, she said, because titles could be tools, be the nail. His jaw clenched. Then he turned to his captain. Do it. It was the first useful order he had given all day. Maribel stepped forward. I will go to the market square. People will listen if they see the queen. Rowan looked at her. It is dangerous. So is being ornamental. Fiola met Maribel's eyes. This time there was no rivalry left between them, only 2 women standing in the wreckage of what men had told them love and duty should look like. Take Cora, Viola said. She knows the lanes. Cora made a face. I just arrived. You are leaving again. Promotion is exhausting. Silas held out the Blackmere master key to Viola. No, she said. You need it at the bridge. He opened his other hand. A second key lay there, older, heavier, carved with 3 interlocking waves. The master key to the old well, he said. Not alone. Viola stared. Silas, you decide where water opens tonight. It was a gift of power, not rescue. A key, not an answer. Her fingers closed over it. She reached into the pocket of her soaked gown, and pulled out the little metal flask she had carried since the convent. The inscription had been scratched by Cora during a brief period of waiting and worse judgment. Private water source, no tax. Viola handed it to him. Silas read it. For the first time, he smiled fully. It was devastating. Several councilmen looked personally injured. A fair exchange, he said. Do not lose it. Never. Maurek rolled his eyes. May romance drown you both. Thimble, from the doorway, shot a neat stream of water into his lap. Maurek shrieked. Cora sighed. The dragon understands timing. Chapter 11. The last hour before sunset belonged to women with wet hems and no patience. Maribel stood in the market square on a wagon and ordered evacuation with a voice that cracked twice and held anyway. She told silk merchants to open their upper rooms. She told nobles to carry children. She told one lord who complained about muddy boots that she would put him in the river personally and charge admission. The crowd obeyed because fear needs a face, and she had finally stopped wearing the face chosen for her. Cora ran below the west quarter with a crew of laundry girls, chimney boys, 2 bakers, and the onion woman, clearing spill arches beneath St. Orla's laundry. They pulled out broken baskets, old stones, and one entire wedding chest. Inside were 3 moldy blankets, a silver spoon, and a love letter from 30 years ago. Leave the letter, the onion woman said. Some poor fool risked damp for that. Mother Aloan rang the convent bells in patterns older than the crown. 1 bell meant clear the lower lanes. 2 meant open the spillways. 3 meant pray if inclined, work if not. Viola stood at the mill gate with the old water seal at her throat and the Blackmere master key in her hand. Thimble coiled in the channel below, larger than she had ever seen it, blue scales bright against the dark water. Poison and sleep had left it. Its mane flared like river weed in storm current. Yet when it looked up at Viola, she saw the small creature from the herb garden, damp, offended, chewing her best ribbon. I need you to push the flow east on my signal, she said. The dragon huffed. Yes, I know you dislike signals. It huffed again. You may choose the signal. Thimble considered this, then sneezed. Not that one. At the flood bridge, Silas and Blackmere engineers braced the cracked lower lock with chains around the stone supports. Rowan was there too, hauling rope with his guards. Viola had not expected that. Cora, passing messages, reported that the king had slipped once, cursed, and kept pulling. It did not erase harm. It mattered anyway. The sun touched the western towers. Maurek's remaining loyalists made their last move then. They came through the laundry arches, 6 men in work cloaks, carrying axes meant for the spillway braces. If they broke those braces, the west quarter would flood when Viola opened the gate. The plan was ugly, simple, and nearly successful. Cora saw them first. She did not scream. She dropped a basket over the nearest man's head and kicked him into a soap trough. The laundry girls attacked with wet sheets. This sounds harmless until one has seen a furious laundress twist linen around a man's legs. 2 went down at once. The onion woman hit a third with a rolling pin she had brought, according to her, for theological reasons. A chimney boy pulled the brace alarm. Bells clanged. Viola heard the alarm from the mill gate. Her hands tightened on the key. If she waited, the bridge team lost the pressure. If she opened, the west quarter might drown. Silas's horn sounded from the bridge. Once. Ready. The laundry alarm rang again. Not clear. Viola closed her eyes for one breath. Not alone, she reminded herself. Not a solitary wife holding a palace together while men looked for applause. Cora was there. Maribel was above. Aloan commanded bells. Silas held the bridge. Thimble waited below. The city had hands. She opened her eyes. Cora, she whispered, as if the girl could hear through stone. Be fast. Below the laundry, Cora was indeed being fast. She slid under a fallen brace, grabbed the axe from a stunned man, and tossed it into the drainage flow. The onion woman shoved the last attacker backward. Maribel arrived with market men carrying tent poles and shouted, For once, hit the correct people. The last loyalist ran straight into Mother Aloan, who had come down the stair with a bell rope in her hand. He stopped. Sister, move. Mother Aloan looped the rope around his wrists and pulled. He fell into a basket of wet underclothes. Abbess, she corrected. Cora grabbed the signal chain and yanked 3 times. Clear. At the mill gate, the bell pattern reached Viola. She turned the master key. Nothing happened. For one horrible second, the ancient lock held. Then Thimble rose from the channel and pressed its horn to the gate. The old water seal at Viola's throat warmed. The lock turned. The mill gate opened. Water did not flow. It charged. It roared through the restored channel, struck the redirected pressure, and drove east toward the flood bridge. Viola ran along the upper walk, skirts soaked, hair streaming loose past her hips. Thimble surged beneath her, steering the current with its long body, fins flared, whiskers bright. At the bridge, Silas heard the water before he saw it. "Hold," he shouted. Rowan and the Blackmere teams braced the ropes. Lady Nerissa herself stood at the chain wheel, silver pins flying from her hair as she shouted counts. The river struck the back of the plug. The whole bridge shook. The cracked brace screamed. Silas drove the Blackmere key into the lower lock and turned with both hands, bandaged palm bleeding through cloth. The brace held. Viola reached the far side of the mill path and lifted the old seal. Thimble burst from the water below the bridge, enormous, radiant, and utterly ridiculous because it still had one white feather stuck to its whisker. It slammed its body against the current. The stone plug lifted. Once. Dropped. Silas shouted something lost in water. Viola saw the problem. The chain was caught on the broken lower tooth. The pressure alone could not free it. Someone had to release the side catch from the bridge tower. Maurek stood there. He had escaped the haul in the confusion, still chained at the wrists but free enough to hold a knife against the side catch rope. "Stop," he shouted. "Stop or I cut it and seal the river forever." Viola's stomach turned. Silas started toward him. Maurek pressed the blade deeper. One more step, Dragon King. The scene froze around the roar. Then Maribel walked onto the bridge from the market side. She was soaked, barefoot, and holding the crown of Crownwell in both hands. "Lord Maurek," she called, voice clear. "You wanted a crown near the water. Catch." She threw it. The crown flew badly, because crowns are not made for flight, and Maribel was angry rather than athletic. It struck Maurek in the shoulder instead of the head. He flinched anyway. The knife slipped. Cora, who had crawled along the outer beam under the bridge because she had apparently been born without proper fear, popped up behind him and looped a wet sheet around his ankles. The onion woman, from the other side, yanked. Maurek fell flat on his back. Silas reached him in 3 strides, kicked the knife into the river, and lifted Maurek by the front of his coat. "The lady told you to catch," Silas said, and threw him into a pile of flood mud beside the tower. Non-Luddy. Deeply satisfying. Cora pulled the side catch. Viola turned the seal. Silas turned the key. Thimble drove the current. The stone plug rose. The deep river burst free. Water thundered through the correct channel beneath Crownwell, up through old veins, into cisterns, wells, pipes, fountains, kitchens, laundries, stables, and finally the cracked sacred basin in the cathedral. The city shouted as every dry wolf-mouth fountain spat, coughed, and roared back to life. The first fountain to recover was the one in the royal courtyard. Rowan happened to be standing directly over it. It shot him 6 feet into the air and deposited him in a hedge. Cora, watching from the bridge, said, "The water has opinions." Chapter 12. Crownwell held judgment the next morning with wet streets, tired faces, and fountains that ran as if they had gossip to spread. Maurek was brought in with mud still in his hair. Cora had told the guards not to wash him because evidence deserved dignity. The court agreed, partly because the smell reminded everyone what he had tried to do. Lord Rosemere confessed that debt and fear had made him help lower the deep plug. Maribel stood through his confession without defending him, though her hands shook. When he begged her forgiveness, she said, "I will visit you when you are assigned to canal labor. Bring gloves." The punishments were practical. Maurek lost land, title, and comfort. For 7 years he would repair canals under guard, beginning with the lowest drainage trench in the West Quarter. Rosemere received the same work, reduced for confession, and his seized silver paid the laundry women, chimney boys, and market wives who had saved the spill arches. The hired men were sentenced to public repair crews and summer bucket service for the elderly. The onion woman volunteered to supervise and smiled in a way that made 3 guards reconsider prison. Rowan kept his crown, but not sole power over water. The council formed the Crownwell Water Trust, led by Viola as keeper, with seats for the convent, the lower quarter, the guilds, and Blackmere. Every repair ledger would be public. Every sealed gate would be inspected. No flattering advisor would again bury a river under polished words. Rowan came to Viola after the decree. He looked tired enough to be honest. "I was a fool," he said. "Yes," Viola answered. A sad laugh moved through him. You could soften it. I did for 12 years. He looked down. Will you ever come back to me? Viola thought of the girl with muddy hands, the wife with ledgers, the woman on the bridge with water roaring under her feet. She felt memory, pity, even a little grief, but no chain. No, she said. I hope you become better than you were. But I will not be the reward for it. Rowan bowed his head and went to the northern ditch works the council had assigned him. It was very muddy. Viola considered that fair mercy. A week later, the sacred spring ceremony was held again, not as a queen's pageant, but as a water-keeping. The cathedral doors stood open. Bakers stood beside barons. Laundry girls stood in front, because Cora claimed height privilege. Mother Eloan sat beneath the repaired tapestry map, now displayed openly. Maribel arrived without the crown, wearing a pale rose gown and carrying a ledger for the trust. When a child offered her water, she knelt and drank from the wooden cup with both hands. The city did not forgive her all at once, but it shifted one small step closer. Silas entered in black and silver, tall enough to make the cathedral pillars seem to improve their posture. The hall noticed, of course. Viola noticed more than was strictly professional. He ignored every stare except hers. Viola stood by the repaired basin in a deep blue gown sewn with tiny crystals like rain at midnight. Her golden hair fell loose to below her hips. The old seal rested at her throat, and the Blackmere Master key hung at her waist. Thimble coiled around the basin, polished and smug, with one stolen bishop button tucked under its chin. The archbishop lifted his hands. Who speaks for the water beneath Crownwell? Viola stepped forward. I do. Do you claim ownership? No. Do you claim service? Yes. Cora spoke for the lower channels. Mother Eloan spoke for the old map. Maribel spoke for the crown that had learned humility. Lady Nerissa spoke for the ancient wells. Rowan, standing below the dais in plain dark wool, spoke for the throne bound to listen below. Silas stepped beside Viola. And Blackmere speaks for the road beneath stone, with no claim made from sabotage. Viola lowered the golden cup. For one breath she was 9 years old again, muddy, stubborn, trying to make water move. Then Silas's sleeve brushed hers, not taking the cup, only reminding her she was no longer alone. Water rose. It surged bright and blue, filled the basin, leapt through the carved wolf mouths, and washed the cathedral steps in light. The city cried out. Children cheered. Old women wept openly. Thimble roared, then sneezed. The sideways wolf mouth sprayed Lord Pentley directly in the face. The ceremony improved at once. At twilight, Viola returned to the convent herb garden, where she had first met the guardian. The little channel ran clear. She set 3 polished stones beside it. Thimble, now small as a hound, nudged them into a better arrangement and laid its head on her knee. Silas came through the garden gate, carrying 2 cups of spring water. His dark coat was buttoned to the throat, severe and elegant, and the little flask she had given him hung at his belt. Private water source, no tax. Lady Keeper, he said. Dragon King. May I court you with fewer witnesses this time? Viola looked at the man who had knelt by accident, stood beside her by choice, torn up power rather than use it against her, and kissed as if rivers had secret hearts. You may, she said. But my standards have risen. Good. My dragon bites. It began with my wardrobe. And I have a city to run. His hand settled at her waist, waiting until she leaned closer. Then I will be useful. Shamelessly useful. Now you are learning. Thimble made a gagging bubble and slid into the channel. Viola ignored it. Silas kissed her slowly in the moonlit garden, and for once no crown, no king, no old wound stood between her and what she chose. Beyond the wall, Cora argued about cake, Maribel taught girls to spot forged seals, Mother Eloan scolded a bishop, and Crownwell ran with living water. The water had finally found a better route. Follow Moonlit Romance Library for more dark, funny, and heart-bright romances beneath the moon.